Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Episode. Today we're going to continuing the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it has been a very busy weekend. We didn't just get a new Nintendo 64 core, we got two, and we also got a new Sega Saturn core as well. If you've been following along with this series, we've been testing Sega Saturn for over a year now, and it just keeps getting better, and this new core is no different. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But there's a new Saturn core, that means SRG320 is good where he is, and that means we are happy more for that than for the core. But jumping right into it, going to Sega Rally, I will show you this in a little bit, but this is just a little bit of an intro teaser. It was that Sega Rally didn't used to boot whatsoever, then it started working with no audio, then it went back to not booting due to regressions. It is back, the audio is crystal clear, everything is working, and I will show you that in just a moment. But another game that's taken some great strides forward is Manx TT. Everyone gets mad when I pronounce it Manx. I know it's Manx, but I do it just to irritate you a tiny bit. But getting into this game, this is one of those Saturn games that pretty much everyone had back in the day. You either rented it or you owned it, and it is a great conversion from the Model 2 arcade original. Now it does seem to be that there's a slight regression on the Saturn 3D control pad on this core. Andy D helped me out with some captures and he had some issues with it. Weirdly enough, I don't own an analog Saturn pad, do not know why it's not in my collection, I've just never picked one up, but I'm going to have to do that this week. If you see a little bouncing into the wall though, that can be what that is. But this just looks good. The draw distance is there, it is running at full speed. This is the Manx TT you remember from Sega Saturn, and I feel like this is the way most people actually remember the game. Not everyone got a chance to play in arcades, even though it was a popular cabinet, but pretty much everyone seemed to own this on the Saturn, and it is a really good conversion that only doesn't do much with the property. It brings the game over, but doesn't expand on it too much, but that's kind of what you got in the 90s when you played games like this. But the great part is the speed and sensation here are exactly what you'd expect to see on original hardware. And when this core is done and I do compare games side by side, I always love using racing games because the speed and sensation of fluidity is something that definitely needs to translate over to the FPGA core, and it seems like SRG320 has nailed it here, at least in this one game. Because as we take these turns, as we go around the track, as all those sprites and polygons are drawn onto the screen at once, it does just seem to be working. And again, this was a game that didn't function very well up until this core. There was one core in which it seemed to do a decent job, but Saturn has definitely had some regressions as more games improve, which is not at all unusual for these cores. A lot of times fixing one thing breaks another, and then you go back and fix that, so you have two fixes and zero problems. And that is part and parcel of the FPGA development process and any development process in general. Even as a film editor, a lot of times that you do draft edits, you may repair some parts of a film and break others as far as the narrative is concerned. You always come back and fix them later. Now another game that has seen some massive improvements is going to be Burning Rangers. Before we could get into this game, you could play it, you could beat some bosses, you could get the general gameplay quote-unquote experience, but the biggest issue was that after like 30 seconds in-game in the tutorial, the audio would stop and you would hear nothing from there forward. The big issue with a game like Burning Rangers is that audio is as big of a component as visual, if not more so. You have a navigator and you need to listen to visual clues so you know when an explosion is going to happen. Playing this game without volume basically makes it a near to impossible experience, which meant that on the MiSTer core previously with no audio, it was not playable. Sure, you could play the game, but you couldn't succeed at it, and that's so much of what Burning Rangers is. The great part is now on this game we have full audio. You can get all the navigation clues as well as the sound cues to make sure you stay safe in a level, and that makes the game 100% playable. You're going to notice some graphical glitches. Some of those are the core and some of those are the game, because Burning Rangers, as I've said before, basically pushed the Saturn to its limits, and when you were playing the game you kind of felt like your Saturn might give up at any point in time. It just did things with the hardware that no other game did before or since. But I just love this game. The colors, the overall visuals, the lighting schemes, everything about Burning Rangers is just classic Sega without Sonic the Hedgehog attached to it. When I think Sega Saturn, Burning Rangers is one of the games that first comes to my mind, but I know a lot of people haven't played this game, so leave me a comment down below and tell me, have you played Burning Rangers or not? I did have an original copy of this on Sega Saturn back in the day, and I traded it in for like $10, and that was one of the stupidest decisions I made knowing what the price is now. But the good thing is we're going to be able to play it to completion on MiSTer FPGA soon. But again, getting the audio in-game takes this game from a visual playable feast to a fully playable experience. So go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds and come back, because I got a lot more games to show you that work.
Tillis, head for the director's office. You might find the cause of the fire in that sector. Roger! Enter the room.
Burning Rangers doesn't so much have a soundtrack as it has a soundscape. A lot of times when you're playing the game, you're going to hear this whooshing noise that is going to indicate to you an explosion is about to happen and you need to basically do a backflip to get out of its way. When the core didn't have audio, you'd basically get tagged 10 out of 10 times unless you had a photographic memory of where everything was in the game because you couldn't hear those things. Additionally, we do have that navigator call button and they will give you directions throughout the world of Burning Rangers. Without that audio, it becomes very difficult to beat any single level because they are maze-like unless, again, you have it memorized. But now the great thing is, with audio on the core, you can do all the things the game asks of you without any issues whatsoever. And again, just seeing this on screen, it's got such a visual flair and vibe to it. This is probably my favorite Sega Saturn game as far as the visuals are concerned, but tell me down below what your favorite one is. I always do love hearing those sort of things. But if you want to play Burning Rangers today on the most current core, you can do it. And another note about this core is it seems to have allowed more people to have success with games on single RAM builds with older RAM modules like the 2.5V versions, or people that have a newer RAM module but that has the 4 RAM chips versus 2. So it seems like under the hood some work has been done to make this core compatible with more of the MiSTer hardware. But tell me if you had problems before and you tried the core, leave me a comment down below because I have heard a couple of reports from people I know saying they've had a lot more success with it. Speaking of games that have a lot more success, Sega Rally here was basically white screening on the previous core. This was a regression. It went to basically not booting whatsoever. It is back, it is beautiful. The sound is great, the controls are good. This is again Sega Rally the way you know and love and remember it. And this was another one of those games on Sega Saturn that was just synonymous with the hardware. I did not know anybody back in the day that owned a Saturn that didn't have a copy of Sega Rally, and I don't know anyone who owns a Saturn today that doesn't have at least one copy. I've got 2, and they are so fun to have. But again, it's just so fun to see these games running on MiSTer, and because of the regression running again. This is the type of thing you can just sit down, play it from start to finish. Sure, there's a graphical glitch here and there, but otherwise you can complete the entire Sega Rally circuit on the current MiSTer core and have an absolute ton of fun doing it, and that's all we really need out of a core. If you can finish a game, if you got a smile on your face, and if it just works, we call it 100% great. Because of course we could pixel peep this and we could find a few things out of place, but honestly, don't pixel peep. It takes the fun away from the game and makes gaming a very boring experience. Now, the last time we showed you Saturn, we showed you Alpha 2, and now we're going to be showing you Street Fighter Alpha 3, because this was a lot of viewer requests. This is the 03 version, but I'm just going to keep calling it Alpha 3, that's how I remember it. But it is working on the current Sega Saturn core, the controls are perfect, the visuals have absolutely nothing wrong with them, and the soundtrack and sound effects seem 100% spot on. Now, of course, we have Hotego's CPS2 core, so we have a lot of ways to play this game, but having it on Saturn is an absolute blast. It's one of those games that everyone remembers, and when I say the soundtrack seems perfect, go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back.
Get ready, fighters! Go for it,
Sounds great to my ears, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think, because you guys have thousands of viewers listening to this video. I have just but the 2. But again, fighting games are such a great test of how the core is doing. Input lag or any other issues with the input are directly going to show up in the gameplay. Fighting games are all about getting your commands in the right order within the frame count before you've missed your input. This is just 100% working in Alpha 3 here. Pulling off moves, playing around, everything is just great. And Andy D, thanks again for helping me with some captures this week. I was playing around with this game a few days ago, and I will say that it feels exactly how it does on my Sega Saturn. It's one of those things, if a fighting game doesn't feel right and you're familiar with it, you're 100% immediately going to know something is going on. I can't tell any difference between this or the CPS2 version or my Sega Saturn original hardware version. You can play Street Fighter Alpha 3, you can have a great time, you can do whatever you want with it, and it's just going to work. And of course, it's one of the best fighting games on the Sega Saturn made by Capcom, so it's going to be a great experience, and I just miss this era of Street Fighter. Sure, the new new games are fun, but honestly, Alpha is where my heart is. That and Street Fighter 3, they're my favorites, but tell me down below what's your favorite Street Fighter. I would be curious. Now, another game that people keep requesting and does have improvements is going to be Cotton Boomerang. Next time I do another testing video, I'll show you Cotton 2. They kind of go hand in hand, but I want to just limit it to one Cotton game on this video. This is another awesome shmup. It's in the horizontal format, obviously, and it kind of feels like the precursor to Death Smiles. I feel like Cave took a lot of inspiration for Death Smiles, and there was a lot of Cotton fans on their team. Last time we played this game, the audio was all over the place. It did not sound good whatsoever. It was scratchy and poppy, and it had the propensity to freeze. Now it just seems like it's 100% working, and if you've never played Cotton Boomerang before, definitely check it out. You're either going to love it or hate it. I know some people don't love the cute-em-up genre of shmups, and I don't think that Cotton Boomerang is 100% a cute-em-up, but it definitely isn't that military or sci-fi theme that most of these games tend to hew towards. This is definitely more of the fantasy variety, but it is just such a competent, awesome shmup that runs great on the Sega Saturn, and on the current core, it's a game you can 100% just enjoy, and because we are getting close to spooky season in October, Pumpkin King here definitely fits the bill for a video. But I told you the audio is much improved. Go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds and come back, because I got even more games that work to show you. It's got such a good soundtrack too, definitely one of my favorites as far as shmups are concerned on the Sega Saturn. And again, I love the fact that a lot of people requested this. It makes me happy to know there's some Cotton love out there, and if you haven't checked it out, you owe it to yourself to do so. Now, another game that people have been asking me to check out, and I've been meaning to for the longest time, and I'm finally getting around to showing it to you guys, is the English translation of Policenauts on the Sega Saturn. Now, there is two categories of gamer, people that are individual novels and people that aren't. I totally understand if it's not for you. If you don't think it's for you and you've never played Policenauts, do me a favor and try it. I think I can make a fan out of you of this genre if you just give this game a shot. This is Hideo Kojima before Metal Gear Solid on PlayStation 1 was a thing. This game is one of the best video games of all time as far as storytelling is concerned. You just need to get around a tiny bit of weirdness that probably wouldn't play today in 2023 like it would the year this game came out. But otherwise, the PlayStation 1 got its translation first, and then it was ported over to the Saturn, and pretty much each different version of Policenauts has something different about it that you can enjoy. But people really wanted to know if this is working on the current Saturn core. It 100% is. Now, it is a very long game, and of course, I don't know if all of these games are 100% able to be completed, but you can get far enough into Policenauts to get the vibe of it, and to decide whether or not it is for you, because this has a great story. It's basically Lethal Weapon in space with space rigs and space Murtaugh, and if that doesn't get you excited to want to play this game, I do not know what else could possibly get you amped up for it. But take it from me, this is one of those experiences you 100% have to have as a gamer at least once in your life. It is such an epic adventure. You're never going to be quite sure where the story is going, but it's going to be good and it's going to hook you in. It is a visual novel, but you do get some gameplay sessions as well, and spoiler alert, if you don't want to know what happens to Jonathan's ex-wife here, just go ahead and skip ahead 10 seconds, but honestly, it's just the inciting incident. It's not that important to the overall story. She's hired him to investigate the disappearance of her husband. He's going to watch her walk out to her car, and that car is going to go boom boom in just a second. It's basically like a mafia scene combined together with Lethal Weapon, and don't forget in Lethal Weapon, toilets and everything else can explode. And honestly, this is one of those things. I'm so happy that people asked whether or not this worked, because it tells me that there is love out there for Policenauts, and you can definitely give it a go. And I'd be curious if anyone has played this from start to finish yet. It's one of those games that is so fun. I feel like somebody probably already has dedicated the time to finding out if it works or not. And like I said, you do get at least a little bit of action here. The controls, if you're not using a light gun around the D-pad, they are janky, but the jank here is exactly the jank you would expect if you were playing on real hardware. So you can play Police Notch, you can play the translation, and you can have one of the best experiences in gaming of all time, in my opinion. Now, speaking of hard-boiled detective games on the Sega Saturn, JB Harold Blue Chicago Blues just got an English translation, and if you ask me what game I least likely expected to get an English translation, this game would be so far up that list it would almost be in the #1 spot. But I'm so happy it got one, because this is just that game of the early to mid 90s that if you were there, you played a style of, and if you weren't, you don't understand whatsoever. I love that this is in Chicago and has some absolutely amazing B-movie tier acting. Go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds. I'll come back and tell you more about this wild game.
The story says that the presumed murder weapon used on Angie Hart was found in Catherine White's bag.
Yeah, that's right.
How about the bag of cocaine? Did Miss White get it here in Chicago?
Well, that hasn't been determined yet.
Was she a dope addict?
No.
How was Miss White related to Angie?
Ain't no idea. I'd like to know the answer to that myself.
Did Miss White kill Angie?
That hasn't been determined. It's still under investigation. The investigation is ongoing. Now, that'll be all.
Listen to this, JB. Here's a phrase that says, "People who live freely in your memory will never die." Tell me, darling, will you let me live in your mind, even if my job kills me someday?
I mean, that's definitely not the best acting I've ever seen, but as far as video games are concerned, it's probably some of the best acting that you're going to get out of this generation. Now, honestly, once you actually get into the game and start making choices in English, some of the FMV video is not going to play correctly. So I can't really say that this game is 100% playable on the current MiSTer core. JB Harold Blue Chicago Blues has been translated, and it's going to be a great experience to have once the core gets the video playing a little bit more. But honestly, the big takeaway of this new core is Burning Rangers. You're just getting sound where it didn't used to be before, and that makes this game insanely playable because you need the navigation, you need the sound cues to be able to have the full Burning Rangers experience. And all of the different graphical effects this game uses to put an image up on the screen, it basically uses almost every single function of VDP1 and VDP2 that Sega engineers could have possibly imagined, and probably a few that are just strung together with duct tape and dreams. But if you haven't played Burning Rangers on the current core, definitely check it out and tell me how far you can get, because I've got this inkling you might actually be able to beat this game. Maybe not this core, maybe the next core, but it feels like some of these games are getting real close to 100% perfect. But that's the story for this Sunday, guys. There is a new Sega Saturn core. We know SRG 320 is good, and we're always happy to hear that. But if there's games I haven't tested yet or you want to see retests on the current core, leave me a comment down below and I'll make sure I try to get to each and every one of them, because the viewer requests are some of my favorite stuff about this series. But short of that, Sega Saturn keeps getting better, and people that had some issues running the core with older RAM modules seem to be having some more success, so that is great. I'll have more MiSTer videos next week, and I'll have videos throughout the week as well. But thanks for watching. Hope you're having a great weekend. Bye bye.